So welcome everybody to our next series in our Ultimate Spark training. We're continuing our conversation from a few weeks ago with buyer conversion that Larry led, and we're going to continue on and continue to talk about working with buyers. So just as a quick refresher, this is what was included in the last session, the initial things that you're doing with buyers, meeting with them, doing the buyer rep, selling yourself to a buyer. And we're going to pick up today around showings and what you do on showings, offers, negotiation, things that happen after you have an offer, and ways that you can continue to work with buyers after they have taken possession and how you turn them into, repeat customers. So again, a little bit of a refresher here with what was covered at the last session, and we are going to pick up after all of this is done. You've already converted them, you have the buyer rep sign with them, and now we're going to talk about what do you do, how does showings work, what should you be looking for, how should you be conducting yourself on those showings with offers, things to watch out for. So this session or slide on in the car, there's sort of two schools of thought about whether or not you should be taking clients with you in a car when you're showing properties or not. One of them is if they do go in the car with you, it's beneficial. You can hear their thoughts, you can ask them questions, you can get feedback from them as you're driving through potentially a new neighborhood or past different styles of homes. There might be some information about them that you can glean by doing showings with them in the car together. And then on the other side of that, some people prefer, some clients prefer, and some agents prefer to let them drive themselves in their own car. They can have a more private conversation. If it's a couple, they can have a conversation amongst themselves about things and then come back to you with questions. Of course, this can change whether you're working with a single buyer or a couple or a family. There's all sorts of things. But
you might want to scroll down a little bit. We still got cover page.
Oh, really? Thank you. Mine says in the car. 1 second.
Perfect.
Oh, you can see it now?
Definitely.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Do you see that now?
Show homes, yes.
Oh, okay, it's changing with me. Okay, good. Thank you. So there are some, sort of sample things here, things to think about if you are taking clients with you in the car. Some, really basic scripts, things that you can talk to them about. But when you're showing homes, so you have your list, you've gone through and selected things that fit their criteria, and you're taking them out and you're actually looking at properties now. So you go to the door. I always encourage people, ring the doorbell, knock on the door. You never know if someone might be home. It's always just good practice to do. And, again, you're going to find your own style when you're working with buyers about how you like to show properties to them. I think, we are looking for different things than they're looking for. We want to notice defects, concerns, any special features that might not jump out to a buyer immediately that we're a little more trained to see. And they're going through looking for, is this going to work for our family? Is this, room big enough for me to have home office? Is it big enough for the kids? Those different kinds of things. So let them into the home, let them look around, and form their own judgments. I think, one of maybe the hardest things to do when you're showing properties is to stay quiet at the beginning. I can't tell you. So, something you learn early on is you might make a comment about something that you think is, awful about a home that a client might really love. And you don't want to be in that position where you're backtracking a little bit or biting your tongue. Let them tell you. Ask open-ended questions when you're in the property and let them talk before you chime in. Another thing that I think, you might want to keep in mind when you're showing properties, is just about recording devices. It's something that is becoming more and more common now. You'll walk up and you'll see a Ring doorbell, or they might have cameras in the home. Some of those conversations, be mindful of that, careful what they're saying in the property a little bit. So we're jumping ahead a little bit. So some people want to start talking about price or whatnot in the home. I would encourage you not to do that while you're showing properties. Do it outside, far away from the doorbell. But just be mindful when you're showing properties that could be happening with some of these conversations. And oh, pardon me. So, when you're showing the property and you've kind of completed it and you're having those conversations, one thing that I always like to do with a buyer is, and I tell them this right in the buyer consult or when we're, starting our journey together, is I'm going to end every showing asking you, do you want to buy this home? And it's not because I think you should or, that you need to, and it's no pressure from me, but it's a good gauge for them to sort of recognize when something does check enough of the boxes or all of the boxes or whatnot. And you ask that question, and it's a little bit of a game perhaps that you're playing at the beginning. But try that out with your buyers. It can be really illuminating in terms of what they're looking for, and a good gauge for them in terms of how prepared are they. Is something that they thought was a deal breaker, maybe not a deal breaker, all those sorts of things. It can be a really powerful question if it's not coming from, a place of pressure. And the other thing, to remember as you're showing properties is that, that process of how you show a particular client properties is going to evolve a little bit as you get to know each other better. You learn more about them, they learn more about you. And, if it's a brand new client you've never met versus a repeat client, this process might be different. And that's okay. And it should be customized to the client, to how they like to look at properties, the conversations they like to have. And you're there to, guide that process and guide those conversations to their best outcome. So there are some, sort of sample dialogues that you could have here. Again, playing that, with that question of, do you want to buy this house? Yes, that's great. If you don't, we're going to keep looking. Do you still want to look at more properties, even if you would buy this house? There's all kinds of ways that conversation can go. But, come at it from a place of supporting their process and not from a place of pressure, and you're going to come out on top. One of the biggest things to look out for when you are in properties with clients is buying signals. There's different types of them. First one here on the screen is verbal buying skills, but this is something that you learn as you go in terms of what are you looking out for in terms of feedback from your buyers about, should we be potentially talking about an offer? So you'll see some of the verbal buying signals here, talking about a closing date, asking about, are those shelves included? Would they come with the property? Saying, I want to bring my parents back or, someone else back. Questions about the price. When they're trying to dig into a little bit, get more information, that's typically a signal that maybe not that they want to buy it, but that they want some more information and that it's a contender in their minds. And then on the flip side of that, there's non-verbal buying skills too to watch out for. If they go back to a room that they've already been in and they spend a little bit more time in there, or they take a long time in every room, talking to each other about, would our couch fit here? Those kinds of things. Opening all the doors, opening all the cabinets, really kind of looking really closely at everything. And then of course there's body language clues that you can be looking out for. All those sort of nonverbal things that show interest, show that they want, a memory of what was there or to picture themselves living there. Those are really important clues for you to make sure that you know how to pick up on. And then there's behavioral buying signals as well. Walking out the door saying, can we come back tonight with my parents? How quickly do they want to get back in there? Calling their mortgage broker. Like I said, discussing actual price or things about an offer, like right there on the property. You want to be mindful about that if there's recording equipment, but that's a pretty strong signal if they're talking about it right when they're at the home. And then those sort of psychological, and some of these are verbal, some of them are nonverbal, but talking about things, like, oh, our Christmas tree would fit here because of the really high ceilings. Talking about the kids' rooms, a nursery, those types of things. All of that is them sort of, advance placing themselves in the property, envisioning living there. And again, really important clues for you to watch and pick up for when you're showing a property. So you've done that and you are picking up on all of those clues and you think, yep, this is a property that they are seriously considering. How do we go about moving it to the next stage to getting them to offer on it? Especially, in this type of market where there's so much choice for buyers. How can we move that along without coming from a place of pressure to get them into a property that it sounds like they really love? So there's some questions there that you see on the workbook about sort of soft close questions. Would you like to talk through making an offer? We don't have to rush, but it might be worth talking about making an offer if this is a home that you're considering. Those types of things. Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, Matthew, thank you so much. Fantastic. This is great the way you're presenting it. I love it. Matthew, just maybe a comment too, and I know you were going to it about one thing we have to do is take ourselves out of the picture, the equation, like not get personal, like going, like I like you said earlier, I wanted to jump in, but you're on a great roll there about when you're going through a home, right? And they start to visualize the Christmas trees or pianos or whatever. And they also start to compare. You ever notice that, Matthew? They say, the last house we had, come on, this has got this. And when you see a couple or partners or whatever start to engage in a conversation about, well, yeah, but you said this, I think this would be perfect. All great buying signals. But I think one of the key things that we do as agents too, sometimes we want to be so helpful, we start to give our opinion about personal, and it's almost like, no, it cannot be personal. It's not me. You're the ones buying this. I will do everything as your agent to help you. But one thing that I really agreed and I love what you were commenting on is about the mindset, about how they going in and the security. That was great. That's something as agents we should always think about prior to going to any showings. Just a reminder, we're going to go into someone's home. Please, if you have any questions or comments, could we refrain from doing them in the home? We can talk about that outside, and it's be great. And leave it at that without going, hey, you know what? We're being taped. But Matthew, I just wanted to add that, and I hope I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but that was just something, and I thought you were doing a great job on that part. So great. Thank you so much, bud.
No, thanks, Larry. I mean, that's when, like you said, couples, partners get into a conversation, it's hard sometimes to not interject and want to, add your 2 cents. But if they get into some, back and forth conversation about what they're looking at, stand back and listen. Don't don't get in there unless they're asking. Because again, you're going to learn a lot, but at the end of the day, as Larry said, it's their potential home, not yours,
Hey,
and they
Matthew,
have to talk about it.
excuse me, Matthew. It's almost out. Hey, Matthew, come on. What do you think of this carpet? I can't stand it. She loves it. I hate it. What are you going to say?
Yeah, sometimes they want you to pick a side or be referee,
The
and
referee.
try not to get into that.
Exactly.
So true. Um, and as Larry said, though, let them be the ones that are controlling the emotional part of the process, right? Our job in all of what we do, not just on the buying side, but just in general, is to not get emotionally wrapped up, right? We are the voice of reason. Sometimes we are the ones who are looking at things more objectively. We're not letting their emotions control what we do, because that's not advantageous to a client. And they're hiring us to stay neutral in a lot of ways, to advocate for them, absolutely, but not get tied up in all of the emotion of it. The next part of this page talks about some questions to ask an agent, as you're working on an offer or starting to prepare that offer. If you ask those sort of soft close questions and they want to move forward, I think it's really important to understand the power of building rapport with a listing agent when you're acting for a buyer. There is nothing worse on the listing agent side than getting an offer land in your email when you've never spoken to the agent. You want to talk to them. You want to ask these questions. Ask all the questions, even ones that you think they shouldn't answer. You never know what people are going to say. And on the buying side, I'm asking all the questions. On the listing side, I'm not answering them, but as a buyer agent, ask the questions, because you never know what someone will divulge. And it starts to build that relationship, because your relationship with the listing agent is really important in getting your buyer's offer accepted, especially in a multiple offer situation. If we return to that kind of market, really important to build that rapport. But even in a slower market, buyer's market, you want to have a good relationship with them. You need stuff from them, they're going to need stuff from you, and you want that relationship that you have with the listing agent to be positive and productive, professional, respectful. So these kinds of questions, while they seem, potentially straightforward, help you build that, because you're going to be talking and working with this person over, a period of time, obviously. So, there's some questions here, but yeah, Larry.
Thank you, Matthew. This is a reminder. We talked about this before, Matthew, you and I at your office, and that's about trying not to get yourself caught up into being bullied. Do you know some agents that will try to overpower you or say, hey, you know what? And don't care, you got an hour to respond. Remember, Matthew just laid it out beautifully for you. Our job is to represent, facilitate this deal, protect our clients' best interests, and explain to them what's going on. We have an obligations and duties of obligation for confidentiality, et cetera, et cetera. But I worry about that bully, because this is an ongoing thing that Matthew, myself, or Nathan get these calls about, well, they're pressuring me. What am I supposed to do? Right? Sorry, Matthew. Again, this is a great topic, and we just want to throw out as much info as we can at people today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that's not on here that probably should be is you want to ask about rental items, because rental items always come back to bite us. So, be asking that question too. I'm just going to throw that in there. So the next part of the workbook talks a little bit about different offer strategies, depending on the kind of market we're in, the positioning of your buyer, how they're coming to, what price they're talking about offering. So first one, in multiple offers, when we're in a hot market, right, your goal in a multiple offer situation is to stand out. You want to be the cleanest, strongest, most appealing offer on the table. That means putting together the offer well, writing it well, making it easy to read, not having mistakes. Knowing your stuff when you're putting together that offer is really important and helps you stand out if there's 10 competing offers. I have won deals by doing that and been told that it's a real thing. Lots of sloppy agents out there. Don't be that agent, right? Be strong right out of the gate and show them that you're serious, your client is serious, you know what you're doing, and you are there to win that offer. You in multiple offers, and always you want to have a serious deposit there, prepared to go. Use your conditions wisely, particularly in multiples. If you have enough time, financing has already been pre-approved and you've talked with spoken with their mortgage broker and they're good to proceed with that particular property and you can remove that condition, great. You have time to do an inspection ahead of time. Does that need to be in there? Is the status done? Has that already been reviewed by your lawyer? You know, you can cut some of that out. And again, that will help you stand out, of course. In that type of market, when the sellers are really in the driving seat, you want to appeal to their priorities. Again, this goes back to the conversation that you have with a listing agent to find out what some of those things are. Obviously, their closing date might be on the listing, but you want to try and, you know, have as much there that is in the seller's favor to help your client stand out. You want to create an emotional connection between the seller and the buyer, not us, but you know, sometimes you can do a letter, of course, which is, I think, spoken about kind of widely, but increasingly we're seeing a little bit more video, cover kind of letters, those types of things. Anything that will sort of humanize your clients to them can work. Doesn't always. Some sellers only care about the price, of course, but you know, not everybody is like that, and you never know. So if that's going to help, or you think it might help, you can encourage your buyers to do something like that. Escalation clauses and bully offers here, if it makes sense, you know, to do that, but you know, as it says, do it strategically. Don't do it just because. Don't do it, you know, sort of casually. If you're going to use that strategy, make sure that it's intentional, and again, that you're coming from a strong position. You know, bully offers with conditions, you know, lots of people would argue is not really a bully offer. So be wise about how you're going about that if you're going to use that strategy. And you know, the last bullet point here sort of goes back to the last one too. Your reputation as an agent matters, right? You want to be professional. We're there to facilitate that transaction. You want to put your offer together really well. All of those kinds of things help you stand out, which helps your client. And then we have some stuff here about if you're not in competition, right? If you're in a buyer's market like we're in right now and there isn't competition or there's no other competition yet, your goal is to protect your buyer and their, you know, price positioning, those types of things, and making it still a win-win situation for everybody. So, you know, a strategy here is you can start a little bit under asking, potentially a lot under asking. We're going to get to that if that's what your buyers want to do, but you want to leave yourself room to negotiate. You know, I would say just generally to go in exactly at what the max of what they're willing to pay in this kind of situation may backfire on you. So be mindful about, you know, the conversations that you're having with your buyers around pricing. Again, you want to be using conditions wisely in this. You have a little bit more flexibility, right, to include more conditions when you're in a buyer's market, but you don't need to overdo that. And again, you don't need to put in unnecessary things just because you can. That's also sort of the time when you can, you know, potentially throw in more inclusions or do a closing date that is more preferable to your buyer as opposed to the seller. You have more leverage in a buyer's market. So, you know, use it strategically again, if you need to. Highlighting certainty, really important in any situation, that you are making clear to the listing agent the capacity of your buyer to close the deal. In, you know, particularly sort of uncertain markets, that's a really big deal because the fallout from not closing is significant. So you want to highlight how strong your buyer is on that side of things. So what do you do if your buyer client comes to you and they say, well, I want to offer $150,000, you know, under, and you hear that and you think that is really low, really low ball. How can you sort of handle that situation without, you know, losing control of your buyer's relationship or, you know, that property if they are really keen on it? So, you know, you can ask, I would encourage you to ask more questions about what is making them think that that's the best number. You've provided comparables, you've gone through all of that with them. Where are they seeing that? And it talks about some things that that answer might reveal. Are they nervous about overpaying, particularly in a market like we're in right now, where, arguably the condo market may fall a little bit more? Are they nervous about that? Are they using old data, or, data that they're getting from the news that is a different neighborhood or a different part of the city, that might not be relevant to the property that they're interested in? Are they testing the water for fun? There are definitely buyers out there in solid positions where they're thinking, yeah, if I can get this at a steal, I'll buy it. But they're not, maybe serious about that particular property, or it's not that they have to move, but they're, again, testing the water, seeing what's out there, seeing how low a seller will go. That's different. And you want to get answers to that so that that can help you. Again, that often comes from either them being sort of highly emotional or highly taken over by facts that might not be true, or things that aren't facts that they think are true. So you want to pull them back a little bit into reality, right? Bring them comparables. If they're looking at comparables in a different neighborhood, focus on comparables where they are. Talk about days on market, the activity in that neighborhood. Really zero in on the area in which they're in. And that will help you with that conversation. Oh, yeah, Larry?
Yeah, and Matthew, it's amazing, this topic. Every time I hear about this, I start to think about, okay, so Matthew, where'd you get this price? Well, my cousin in Alberta was telling me that they know and heard. So you start to get the professional advisors, not you, because they want to hear from, whoever, that person. And the other thing is, they may be actually educating you, going, listen, I know this property. I've been watching it. It's been on the market for a long time, or I've been testing waters. The reality is, though, our objective is, okay, it's a client's directions. You've done everything you could in your power, Matthew, to explain to me why this low ball offer may be, but you have to explain to them too, that going, okay, I'll take your directions, I'll take your offer, but I will tell you, and Matthew, this is probably where you're going to add in about what might be the dialogue if we role play this, Matthew, and I says, hey, Matthew, I want to offer, $1.5 million, and it's at $1.8 million. What might you say to me if you go, fine, I'm going to draft this offer up on your behalf, but would you warn me about anything, Matthew, or say anything to me?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are, you want to be educating buyers about the potential risks of doing that. Sellers can be insulted and sort of not respond. And even if you came back with a higher offer, they might not want to deal with you because they're insulted. That is a real thing. Sellers feel that way. Again, our clients are emotional. We have to try not to be, but they are. And there are definitely people out there who, I think, yeah, it says there, if you come in too far off, you're going to put yourself potentially in a negative negotiating position because you've tipped them off, right? And you have to be mindful about that. And that's the conversation you have to have with the buyer to get them to recognize that they may actually be harming themselves, if they're going too low, right? Of course, especially in a buyer's market, we want to make sure that they're getting a good price and there's more room and all of that. But you just have to be mindful. And again, this is where a conversation in advance with the listing agent can be beneficial, about asking about, their price, getting a sense from them about where they're at. Some listing agents might flat out tell you, they shouldn't, but they might, where they're at, and ask those questions, see what you can get, because that's going to help you too in this conversation. So, there's some things here that you can do to maybe get creative without ticking them off. Things about, perhaps more inclusions, addressing an abatement for repair issues, if that's something that's doable. Seller take back mortgages. I mean, those haven't been common for many years, but potentially they'll be coming back. There are things that you can do to, again, be creative instead of coming off as just a cheap jerk. You want to be strategic, especially with low balls, right? Have that conversation with them about how the seller might react. They might not even respond to you if they're really upset. all of that, make sure that they understand that your buyer understands the importance of being strategic when you're talking about low balls. Talks here again about calling the listing agent. Absolutely, we've spoken about that. And then, asking them, if you lose this property because of this strategy or because of this price and someone else buys it at, the price you were maybe willing to go up to, how would you feel about that? That can be a really powerful question just in general with buyers, even on the flip side in multiples, to say, if someone pays $1 more for this property, are you okay with that? That's really where you can talk about their limits, and it helps handle this situation, but also, gives you some valuable information too. So about presenting the offers and how you do that, it can make quite a big difference. Of course, there are pros and cons to the different methods. I started in the business when all offers were in person, and it was kind of nice. I sort of miss those days. You can email offers, right? It's easy. You get it submitted quickly. Everything is documented, great paper trail, which is obviously a positive. It's convenient for people, particularly maybe if your clients are at their cottage when they want to offer different things. Electronic signatures have really helped that process, obviously, and there's definitely pros to doing it over email. But the cons are you have no control, no influence on how that offer gets presented to them. Again, you can include, a letter from your buyer or a video or whatever. There's no guarantee that they're going to take that seriously or, review that with the kind of intent that you want them to. It might be easy to overlook if they might just look at just the price and rule it out immediately because of the price and not read any farther. You don't have any control over how it's done. And you don't get any real reaction aside from a conversation with the listing agent. So, pros and cons to emailing, and there's pros and cons to doing it in person. In person, you are a little bit more in control of how it's presented. You control the narrative a little bit. You're able to position your buyers, obviously, in a great light and talk through all of the details, building rapport not just with the listing agent, but also with the sellers. Ideally, they're sitting there too. And those are just things that you can't do in email because, sellers are people too. And you get a little bit more of a read when you're sitting across from them telling your client's story. And you get to potentially stand out. The way you present an offer can win an offer for you. I'll tell you a quick story about many years ago. I had a client who won a property where we were not the highest offer, and after it was accepted, my clients were in the car and they came in, and the seller said to them in front of everybody, the way your agent presented this and presented you to me is why you won the property. We had, someone that wanted to knock it down and do kind of an infill home here. That's not what we wanted. So we took less money because of the way you were presented to us. It works. It really does. So if you have the opportunity to present in person, I would encourage you to do so. It really can make a difference for your client. But obviously there's some downsides to that. Logistically, a lot of people now, because of the ease of email offers, might not be their preference. You can't force them into doing it that way. But try. I would say try, because it can be powerful. We've talked a little bit about this, but the way you're putting together an offer is a reflection of you, obviously, and by extension, a reflection of your buyers. So you want to obviously have a really deep understanding of your buyer clients, their strengths, how certain are you of their ability to close, all that sort of stuff. You want to highlight things in the offer that are speaking to the seller's requests or what their priorities are, and anything that they might be wondering about or have questions about, you want to address immediately and kind of pre-anticipate that question so that you can address it in the offer. When you're positioning, if you're doing this in email even, but again better in person, you can do this a little bit in email if you're sending a little bit of a I guess a bio about your buyers. What made them fall in love with the house? Why do they, why do they love it? Are they committed to the home? That can be really valuable, depending on the type of market. Um, if you are having sort of what would be considered a weaker offer or a lowball offer, you want to be positioning that again strategically. So you've had the conversation with your buyer about how can we use this method strategically. You want to highlight that to the listing agent too, because again, they might receive it, look at the price, and sort of move on right away. You might not have a chance, if you're doing it over email, to get them to look through the full offer in as much detail as they should. So position it that way right off the get-go, as best as you can, even if it's, potentially a weaker offer. Questions here again, this goes back to what we've talked about having conversation, having rapport with a listing agent. It really helps you out in advance of an offer presentation, because your relationship with a listing agent can again be a point in your favor if you've done a good job at building that rapport. They trust you. They, know that you've asked intelligent questions and not just, random questions. You're asking the right questions. You're addressing things that they've told you matter to their client. All that sort of stuff is really important and can be beneficial to you in terms of winning that offer for your buyer. Don't leave things open-ended and stick the landing. You want to end your email, end your in-person presentation confidently, coming from a position of strength. It's really beneficial, again, to show that you're certain about your buyers, their ability to close, all of those kinds of things, and that you're coming from a position of strength and authority. So you've done that and potentially get a sign back. Just a couple things here to keep in mind when you're dealing with sign backs as a buyer agent. Like I said, sellers can be emotional. Obviously, your buyers can get quite emotional. Sign backs can be difficult conversations sometimes with your clients. And I would say again, it's not our job to get emotional about it. Let them get emotional. Absolutely, that's their right to do. But you want to come at it again from a position of professionalism, knowing what you're there to do, knowing how to help them get the property that they're interested in. And so, don't take those things personally as best you can. If you have a listing agent who isn't the greatest, that's unfortunate, but your clients really want that property. You still have to step up, be the better agent, and get that done for them if that's really what they want to do. Commission breath is a real thing, right? People can tell when we're invested for our own interest. And of course, we can't do that. But I'm sure that it happens. But again, you're going to alienate your client if they can tell that about you, right? This is about them, only about them, and keep that in mind, through that process. And always try to keep the deal alive and never give up. This can be a challenge, absolutely, but you're there to advocate for your client, to act in their best interests. And if this is a property they really want, you're going to do everything you can to, get it across the finish line for them. So thinking here about breaking up with your client. And so just really quickly, if you are working with a buyer who perhaps you don't enjoy working with, or it's clear that they don't enjoy working with you, they don't trust you, they're not taking your advice, they're not fulfilling their end of their obligations, things that we need from them to do our job, all those kinds of things. You have some choices, right? You could sign a cancellation of the buyer rep. You can refer that out to another agent if it's someone who maybe it's just a personality clash, because that can happen. And you might think, you know what, I'm not the right agent for you, but Nathan would be great because his style is a little bit more in line with them. You can do that, right? If you can refer it to someone within our group of companies, that's awesome. But there might be someone out there who's a better fit for them. You could do that. You can continue until it expires, but I would say that's probably my least favorite choice, because nobody likes to work with someone that they're not enjoying working with, right? Work with people that you want to work with, and your business will be better. You'll be better. It's often the best choice for your own kind of emotional sanity. So, do that while you can. The next couple pages of the workbook are sort of a checklist that you can give to your buyers. Once they've got a property, what happens next? You can adapt this maybe into your own closing package or post-closing package, because when they've got a deal, lots of technically, that's when our job is, I guess, over. We've fulfilled our part of it by getting them a property. But if you can handle the next phase of your relationship with them really well, that's what leads to referrals. That's what leads to repeat business. That's where so much power is, if you can handle this part of it. So there's some things here that you can work into, or this checklist you can work into your post-close thing with them. It just sort of gives them a heads up about what do they need to expect going forward, right after the deal's accepted all the way till closing. So work that into your post-deal package for them. Speaking of that relationship and how can we strengthen that and make them raving fans of ours, obviously lots of agents give closing gifts, something to thank your clients for working with you, for putting their trust in you, for helping allowing you to help them get their home. Different things that you can do, or some ideas here. You can do things that are customized. Lots of people will do those customized Cutco knife, that type of thing. There's lots of companies out there where you can do engraving or something like that. Home portrait illustrations. I have an artist that I like to work with that paints like watercolor images of a client's home that they've just purchased. And if it's, their first home together, potentially as a couple, or their first family home or something, sometimes that can be a really nice gift. If you have built that relationship up with your buyer really well, you're going to know what they'll respond to, what they would, what would be a good fit for your client, because not all of these ideas are good for every client, maybe. Subscription-based gifts. I know agents who do this, who, if they move to, a new area of the city, might set them up with some kind of delivery membership to a local brewery, if they're, beer drinkers, or coffee shops, those kinds of things, where they can do that. If they're moving from a condo to a home, or maybe a home service membership to handle snow for their first winter, something like that. Meal kit delivery, you'll see again. Experience-based gifts. Again, if they're in a new neighborhood, maybe you get them gift cards to a couple of local restaurants to get them out there and experiencing their new neighborhood. All those, there's no end, obviously, in the things that you could do to thank your clients. But, this can go a long way, and it's something to consider. You also want to, leverage that relationship and the, great job you just did for your buyers as best as you can. The best time to ask somebody for a referral is sometimes right after you have an accepted offer. But, or when you've dropped off that closing gift, to ask them for that. Pick a spot where you gather your referrals, whether, it's a Google business profile, or I know there's a tool out there that syncs with realtor.ca, Rank My Agent. There's different places where you can get those referrals, but, try and focus them in one spot so that you can use those. They're great for marketing. They're great for people who are doing their research before selecting an agent, right? And, don't be afraid to ask for those referrals or those reviews, because if you've done a great job and it's been a really positive relationship, most people are more than happy to do that for you. They recognize that you're running a business. They want to help you. Not everyone's going to do it, but don't be afraid to ask, because they can be really powerful when they do. Larry.
Yeah, Matthew, I couldn't agree with you more there, especially about asking for those testimonials at this time, because they've just finished off something. And, when they get that home, with their dream home or whatever it is, they're in good mindset, right? If you belabor this or it goes on too long, they start to forget the process. So it's better right there at the key, and explain it to them. My job is I work on referrals. I work with people, and I hope you enjoyed, what I did for you. And it would be great because your testimony will be, awesome. For me to input, like it's about you. They want to help you now because you've just helped them. So don't be afraid. And you're right, Matthew. Don't be afraid to ask. Step up and go, seriously, this is how we do our jobs. We're self-employed and appreciate if you can help me out. Don't be afraid.
Yeah. More people do it than you'll think, but lots of us are afraid to ask. So try to set the fear aside. And then the last thing about staying in touch, again, when you're talking about building a referral business, and I think in the fall we'll have a session about building a referral business, but that staying in touch after is what really helps you build a strong referral business. You worked hard for them, right? You don't want to let all of that sort of just go because you had a great relationship with them, you worked hard for them, you got them a great outcome. Don't let that just kind of evaporate. Have some sort of system, and again, we'll talk about this in a referral session, but what is your people always say a touch plan. Like, what does that look like? How are you staying in touch with your clients? What CRM are you using? How are you tracking that? All of those things really important to help you build a sustainable business where in 5 years, 80% of your business is referrals because you've mastered this skill. It is a skill, it takes work, but you are better off lots of people will say you're better off spending $10,000 of your marketing budget on past clients than trying to find new ones, because these people know what it's like to work with you. They know what you're about. They know your style, all of that. They know your strengths. So if you invest into your people, they're going to come back down the road, right? It's just a fact. So I would encourage everybody to really focus as you're building your business, if you're newer in the business, that this is an area that you really spend a lot of time developing and trying to master, because the payoff is significant. And also it gets you working with people you've already worked with. And, when you get a referral from a client, you kind of know maybe what that other client is like, because like people attract. And more than often, their friends are going to be kind of the same personality, or a good personality fit with your past clients, maybe a good personality fit with you. So, yeah, lots of power here. I think the last page of our book here is kind of a fun letter that you can read and consider sending out to your clients afterwards. I know that this letter was something that Tim used to send out back in the day when he was still trading, and it's kind of a fun letter to send to people. So I'll let you read it. But essentially, it's about the withdrawal that people get from realtors. I know I definitely have clients in the past who've been like this. They get sad about not getting prospect matches anymore, or they find themselves still hunting. So give this a read. It's something maybe not a great fit for every client, but you'll definitely have clients who appreciate the sort of the humor in here. So that's it from our workbook, but we're very happy to take questions. If anybody has any questions or thoughts, things that have worked well for you with your buyers, we'd love to hear them. I'm sure it would be beneficial for people that are listening. So if anyone has anything, you can raise your hand. If not, we'll let you go for the day. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. That will, Larry, yeah.
I was going to just say thank you so much, Matthew. Great presentation. I think it's sometimes even a reminder to all of us, right, that what we take for granted, when you're working with buyers and how important it is with buyers that, you know what? It's like I say, it's a great refresher. As you can see there, Janice is saying it's true. It is. One thing that's a key thing that we always have to remember is time is of the essence, especially when we're dealing with people with conditions or clauses and buyers are going, oh my God. And Matthew, you mentioned about a sign back. Well, I'd say, Matthew, congratulations. You did something because you got a sign back. That means that's as good. This is good news because they didn't throw you out. They want to work with you. That's a great sign. It's a positive sign. So again, we always concern ourselves with timing and efficiency. And Matthew, Nathan, and myself will always be here if you need any kind of just even to talk to us about or just vent something that's going on. We'd be more than happy to help you out and do what we can. Again, Matthew, I just want to say great job. Thank you so much. And I'll leave it to that. And some people are.
Yeah, Lita, just your question there. So the video recording will be in our My RE/MAX Ultimate site, and the copy of the workbook will be attached with the video training, so you'll be able to get it in there. Well, I hope everybody has a great Wednesday. That is the last of our Spark training. We'll let you have the summer off, and we will be back with working with sellers in the fall. But as Larry mentioned, we are always here to answer your questions, to talk through. I have lots of agents who call, mid-offer for advice on strategy, those kinds of things. We're always here to talk through things if you need. So give any of us a call anytime. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for joining.